In 1995, Forbes published an article titled "The Internet's First Victim." In the article, John Hayes predicted that the scientific publishing powerhouse, Elsevier, would go underwater when the internet became mainstream. That's because people would simply look up the scientific papers online instead of paying a subscription fee to the journals. After the publication of the article, investors got nervous. Elsevier's stock fell 7% in just 2 days to $26 per share. But turns out, he was wrong. Really, really wrong. Not only did Elsevier remain insanely profitable over the years, they even led scientific publishing into becoming a multi-billion-dollar industry, a $26 billion industry to be exact. In the 2010s, Elsevier made so much money that their profit margin was sitting at nearly 40%, much higher than that of companies like Apple and Amazon. On the surface, the business model doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. First of all, their target audience is small and narrow. Most ordinary people off the street don't read scientific journals, let alone pay a subscription fee to read them. Second, the profit margin for a traditional publisher, say a magazine, is fairly low. There are many costs to cover. They have to hire writers for articles, they employ editors to commission and check the articles, and then they have to pay for the distribution costs as well. The profit margin for a successful magazine is only about 12 to 13%, much lower than Elsevier's. So then, how do scientific journals manage to become so profitable? The way a scientific journal makes money is very similar to how a magazine does it, but the difference is that scientific journals are able to avoid the majority of the costs. Instead of hiring writers, scientists and researchers create their work by their own direction, and they are funded by the government. Then they give it to the publishers for free. For editing tasks, the publishers pay for the editors to check for grammar and styling issues. But the bulk of editing responsibilities, like checking the validity of the science and experiments, are done by other scientists on a volunteer basis. This process is known as peer review. When this is all said and done, the publishers then sell the products to universities and libraries, which is ironic because most of them are subsidized by the government already, and the government is the one who funds the research in the first place. Analysts once identified this as a triple pay system, where the government pays for the research, pays for the salaries for those who do the work, and then pays again to buy most of the published product. In this system, scientific publishers like Elsevier only work as a middleman and pocket the money. How much money, you ask? We're talking about upwards of multi-millions a year of subscription fees from one institution. Harvard University alone once overran their research journal budget for $500,000 in only 1 year. Now imagine every library and university across the world operating on the same budget. The scientific publishing industry is literally sitting on a fat pile of money. But many analysts predicted that this pipeline of money might not last forever. As the biggest consumer of the journals, the government can easily intervene and make all the public-funded research free to the public. Universities and libraries have all the right reasons to cut down their journal budgets. Scientists and researchers can also dismantle the business by making their work available somewhere else. If any of these stakeholders pulled a trigger, the entire industry would fall like the Tower of Babylon. All these arguments sounded good in theory, but the analysts also failed to recognize a few things about the business. For one, the scientific publishing industry doesn't function like a pure competitive market. Actually, it's more like an oligopoly. About 70% of the scientific papers in the nature and medical sciences are published by the top 5 major publishers. With so much control and power over the market, the publishers use this advantage to keep the libraries and universities captive. They raise their subscription fees every year and keep milking the institution's journal budgets. Robert Maxwell, a prominent figure in scientific publishing, once mentioned that there was no limit to the scientific journal market. Scientific articles are about groundbreaking discoveries, and one article cannot substitute for another. If a new journal appeared in the market, the scientists would simply request the university to subscribe to the new journal. But the university would not terminate their subscriptions to other journals. Maxwell knew that there was no competition in the industry. His publishing house eventually branched out to other academic fields like sociology, psychology, economics, and even hospitality management. He was right. There was no limit. This oligopoly market model brings a lot of money to the publishers, but it also meddles with the day-to-day practice of science. Over time, these journals become overbearingly powerful, and they establish themselves as the gatekeepers of science prestige. For scientists who want to excel in their careers, they have to publish in one of these journals in order to get jobs and funding. So, to impress the journal editors, scientists limit themselves to topics that are popular with editors and reject any prosaic work that doesn't have a wow factor. These journals hold so much power that they also shape the direction of science itself. This interesting dynamic has turned into a positive feedback loop. Scientists grow to be dependent on these high-impact journals to publish their work. In return, the publishers continue to dominate the industry as the only credible sources of scientific knowledge. In the late 90s, when the internet became popular, Elsevier recognized that they had to capture the digital market before it was too late. They rolled out something called the Big Deal, where it offered electronic access to hundreds of journals at a time. Institutions would only need to pay a set fee each year, and their students and professors could download any journal they wanted on the website. With this new and exciting product, universities and libraries started throwing money at them. In 2009, Cornell University reportedly spent at least $2 million on their journal budget. The publishers found themselves sitting on a pot of gold once again. Despite what analysts predicted, the internet actually helped the scientific publishing business. The digital platform made publishing even cheaper than print. The publishers' profit margins kept rising and rising every year. When it came to making the switch to the internet, smaller nonprofit publishers couldn't afford the equipment and financial costs to host the papers online. As a result, they lost their ground and began selling their journals to large for-profit publishers like Elsevier. However, the scientific and academic communities weren't oblivious to this. Since the early 2000s, scientists have been vocal about dislodging the system. One of the alternatives to subscription publishing they proposed was open access. The goal was to remove the commercial element completely from the equation. Then the scientists would pay an upfront fee to cover the editing costs. Ever since its introduction, open access was able to gain wide support from academia. But despite the financial backing from some of the most prominent organizations like the Bill Gates Foundation, only a fraction of scientific papers are made available to the public. The for-profit publishers still have the upper hand. Knowing that their profitability is at risk, they have been going after any agencies or websites that have attempted to make scientific papers free to the public. Turns out Elsevier wasn't the internet's first victim. In fact, they were the internet's first winner.